The Stig was Andy and Jeremy's creation. He was initially to be named the Gimp, but BBC executives pushed back on it. That's when they decided to use a name given to freshmen at the boarding school they both attended when they were teenagers. The Stig was a masked racing driver who was presumably the fastest racing driver in the world. His only identity was the Stig. No one could know who he was. The viewing public, the studio audience, top-tier staff were not permitted the knowledge. Only the trio and Andy Willman knew. This brings out the behind-the-scenes eccentricity of Andy. One staffer said that if anyone had discovered the identity of the Stig, they would be fired on the spot. It must have been a very bizarre place, even for television. Now, even though they had very strict regulations, somehow it was found out that Perry McCarthy was the driver behind the mask. And that only took 1 year. Turns out Perry outed himself by attempting to copyright the Stig name. Then he was fired off an aircraft carrier, and that was that. They soon acquired a new Stig, with the same parameters surrounding the knowledge of his identity. He stuck and became not just the mascot for the show, but perhaps part of the logo. But again, one day out of the blue, the Stig wrote a book about his life as a Stig. They must not have been paying these Stigs properly, or perhaps it was all part of the plan. Let's dissect the idea of the Stig. Presumably, it was one man who did all the lap tests and all the ultra performance shots during car reviews, and perhaps this is true. They obviously knew coming into the role the amount of secrecy involved, and they still decided to unveil themselves. Why? Were they not being paid properly? Or was it a deliberate attempt to make headlines? I believe it was the latter. I also believe Perry McCarthy decided that he didn't want to be the Stig anymore. The Top Gear team took this information and decided to make a show of it. The outcome would be the same regarding Perry's departure, but heads would be turned and gossip would be forming. That's what Jeremy likes most of all, and he's quite good at generating it. A few years down the line, when Ben Collins decided to put away the helmet, it was decided he should write a book. All this generated a lot of buzz. That was amazing and astounding. It was like finding out Clark Kent was Superman. It was utterly mind-blowing. And that was the whole point. Perhaps the sole purpose of the Stig's existence. A question I have is, how do active racing drivers with full schedules in multiple race series find the time to go about doing all that? On top of that, they don't receive credit? Highly unlikely. I believe they fit a body into that suit whenever one was available. Over the years, there have been countless racing drivers on the show doing a number of activities. Every one of them were the Stig at one point or another, especially Tom Chilton. I hear you thinking, that's bullshit. Maybe you said it out loud as well. Perhaps you couldn't care less either way. Nonetheless, consider this. On June 1st, 2009, Top Gear returned with the 13th series. The first episode started with a historic race to the north. It followed the regular format until they began speaking about the FXX, Ferrari. Afterward, the Stig set a monumental track time before revealing himself as Michael Schumacher, the most prolific racing driver of the time. I frequently came back to this moment. I thought, how odd a moment it was to reference the FXX and its peculiarities right before revealing the Stig's true identity. I later learned from the book, and on that bombshell, that it was Michael Schumacher who was driving the FXX. That's bothering, because later on at the end of the episode, Jeremy says he believes Schumacher wasn't the Stig after all. Then it struck me. When they were explaining the FXX, they were leaving us a clue to how the Stig works. Think of the FXX as the Stig costume and all the owners of the FXX as the racing drivers who portrayed the Stig. Let me elaborate. It's suggested that there isn't one FXX for every customer who owns it. At the same time, it would be hard for one to prove otherwise. Whether or not that's true, the Top Gear team was putting both things together in one segment as one Easter egg for us to find. They wanted us to connect the dots, and I believe I have. The segment was the proof, but there are more we could dissect and learn from, including Jeremy's planned departure from the show.
I want to come back and try and slowly crawl up that pole of yours.
Oh, God, this show won't be running that long. So goodbye, we're off.
Yeah, that's it. Why are we there doing what we do?
I know.
Why do we make Top Gear here? This is the worst country in the world for making a car program.
Honestly, I think we should go, I really do, because that is civilised behaviour.
In Series 13, Episode 5, in the news segment, the trio were chit-chatting about a speeding ticket issued to a Bugatti two-door. After reading out loud how little the driver had to pay, the trio and the studio audience were amazed. The presenters then began to lament about doing a car show in Britain. They suggested doing a car show in the USA would probably be a better idea. About a year and a half later, after a very entertaining interview with Jonathan Ross, who had just returned to the BBC after being fired, Rossi remarked that he would love to come back on the show, to which Jeremy responded, "This show won't be on that long." This could be an indication that Jeremy Clarkson and others were experiencing ill feelings toward the BBC. If you followed the events that took place in the following years, you could understand why these remarks were very insightful. Now, my point of this series is not to unmask Stig or reveal the makers of contemporary Top Gear to be monsters of any sort. The reason I made this documentary is to bring to light the majesty of their creations. A lot of what makes Top Gear this momentous phenomenon is lost on many, I believe, including the presenters that followed. Between the risky puns and outrageous adventures and challenges, there was a real depth. Nevertheless, after the remarks I mentioned earlier and before Jeremy's departure from the BBC, the show was ever more a speeding locomotive. Pardon my off-topic pun. The show got larger than ever and even more controversial. I believe Jeremy was looking for a reason to be fired, not because he wanted a nice severance check, but because he wanted to make headlines again. I suspect Jeremy feels it when something is becoming stale, especially himself. It's a trait that not many people have. He was quoted right before his departure from the original Top Gear to have those exact feelings. That is one key to his success and the success of the show. Another key was using that knowledge to enrage and entertain people, drawing them in, keeping them glued to their Twitter feeds and TV streams. To be quite honest, I don't care about how many people portrayed this Stig at one given time. My point is, the way they went about creating and performing the show will be very difficult to emulate. After they're gone, I don't believe we will see their like for a very long time. I also believe that the golden age of Top Gear is an excellent case study on what to do to get famous, what lengths one must go through. Now, in saying that, allows me to feel comfortable expressing that nearly everything Top Gear did was staged, including their newest venture, the Grand Tour. I'm not saying Richard didn't crash. I'm saying the crash was planned in order to bring Top Gear from national to world attention. Same with the USA road trip to New Orleans, same with the Stig's face reveal, same with the supposed subliminal messaging in the Patagonia special, same with Jeremy punching his producer in the face, resulting in his termination. It's all an art that goes beyond the realm of television. The news cycle and the social media feed is all part of the show. For individuals or groups endeavoring to make a name for themselves in entertainment, studying Top Gear or considering very carefully everything I've mentioned in this series could be crucial to their success. After carefully curating material that could be the best it will ever be, how would you go about letting people know? Nobody wants to watch an ad telling them how great you are. Everyone, however, wants to give their opinion. By creating content or events that inspire opinions to be formed, word of mouth is spread. Word of mouth spreads like wildfire, perhaps faster than an algorithm. So if you're a content creator looking to start a fire, perhaps everything I mentioned here could be your avenue. Thanks for watching.